Hitler's armies surged toward Russia with absolute confidence. The road ahead seemed paved with victory. Tanks advanced rapidly, soldiers filled the roads, and cities fell one after another. At first, everything appeared to be going according to plan. But as winter approached, the picture changed completely. Roads drowned in mud, supplies were delayed, and with the first wave of cold, the real enemy revealed itself, the Russian winter. Merciless storms, brutal frost, and soldiers collapsing from freezing before bullets could reach them. The invasion, once full of confidence, turned into a military tragedy that changed the course of the entire war. In the first days, German forces penetrated deep into Russian territory with unprecedented speed. Thousands of soldiers marched in organized formations, tanks cleared the path, and heavy artillery thundered without pause. Everything suggested that victory was near and that Moscow would fall, as many cities had before it. Confidence and arrogance spread through the German army. They had grown used to quick victories in Western Europe and did not expect a different resistance in the East. Small Russian villages fell one after another, prisoners filled the roads, and supply convoys moved endlessly. Soldiers sometimes sang, laughed around small fires, and wrote letters home claiming the war in Russia would be over in weeks. Berlin newspapers echoed the same message, boasting of a lightning advance and an invincible army. Yet behind this bright image, the first signs of exhaustion appeared. Russia's distances were greater than the commanders had imagined. Roads were rough, forests endless, and supply lines stretched hundreds of kilometers. Every breakdown meant days of delay. They retreated slowly, applying a scorched earth strategy, burning crops and moving supplies far away, leaving nothing for the enemy. For every step the Germans advanced, they gained land but lost time. As autumn approached, rains turned the ground into mud. Tanks and trucks bogged down, wheels sank deep, and soldiers struggled through knee-deep swamps. The once proud advance slowed to a crawl. They knew the forest paths, used light carts, and launched surprise attacks on stranded convoys, vanishing before anyone could catch them. Each night, the Germans lost supplies and strength, while their enemies grew bolder. As winter loomed, German soldiers asked themselves, if autumn is this harsh, what will true winter bring? When the temperature suddenly dropped, the German soldiers realized the battle had entered an entirely new stage. Mud turned into sheets of ice. Roads became frozen blades that cut into feet and crippled horses. The northern wind blew relentlessly, carrying snowflakes that pierced clothes and burned skin. The German army had no protection, thin coats, flimsy boots, and no gloves. Each morning, soldiers woke with fingers frozen black, some losing entire limbs. Rifles jammed, oils froze, and even the mighty tanks stopped as their fuel solidified. Bread turned into rock-hard blocks that had to be smashed with axes before eating. Soldiers melted snow in tin pots for a sip of water and shared a single piece of dried meat among 10 men. For the Russians, this was familiar ground. They wore heavy coats, fur-lined boots, and wool hats. They moved swiftly through storms, attacking at night and vanishing into the snow. Exhausted Germans could not keep up, and every small skirmish ended in heavy losses. The mighty invading army was now trapped on a frozen front, fighting not just a human enemy, but cold, hunger, and despair. As the Germans neared Moscow, they expected the capital to fall like other cities. Instead, they found streets turned into fortresses, civilians digging trenches, and Soviet soldiers entrenched in snowy strongholds. The Germans were exhausted, marching in torn clothes and frozen boots. Some collapsed on the roadside and never rose again. Supplies failed, ammunition dwindled, planes could not take off, and tanks were abandoned. Meanwhile, the Russians turned winter into a weapon. Their heavy coats and warm boots gave them mobility. They struck suddenly, disappearing into the snow. German morale crumbled. Letters once filled with victory turned into cries of despair. By December, the Soviets launched a massive counterattack. Thousands of soldiers, supported by tanks and artillery, surged across the frozen front. The exhausted Germans were overwhelmed. They retreated for kilometers, leaving behind equipment, abandoned tanks, and frozen comrades. Moscow did not fall. It became a symbol of Soviet resilience and the graveyard of Hitler's eastern ambitions. As winter reached its peak, the German dream of conquest was shattered. Retreat was the only option. But it was no ordinary withdrawal. It was a slow collapse of massive armies trapped in a frozen desert. Tanks froze into lifeless iron coffins, horses collapsed in the snow, and trucks filled with supplies lay buried like steel graves. Soldiers marched in broken lines, wrapped in thin coats, their swollen feet turning black with frostbite. Many abandoned their weapons, too heavy for their frozen hands. Some sat by the roadside to rest and never rose again. The retreat became a march of ghosts, hungry, freezing men stumbling endlessly under blizzards. The Soviets hunted them relentlessly. Light infantry struck at night, ambushing convoys and vanishing into storms. Every attack left more bodies, more abandoned gear, and fewer men willing to fight. Cold was not the only enemy. Hunger soon devoured the German army. Supply convoys had been swallowed by mud and snow. What reached the front were crumbs of dry bread, rations too small to feed a child, let alone an army. Desperate, soldiers searched destroyed villages for scraps of flour or potatoes. They boiled grain from the ground, slaughtered their own horses, and ate raw or half-cooked meat. But hunger weakened bodies, and disease finished the job. Pneumonia, frostbite, and infections spread uncontrollably. Fingers and toes turned black, some amputated with crude tools in screams of agony. Overcrowded huts turned into breeding grounds for epidemics. The Germans no longer fought the Soviets, they fought their own failing bodies. Letters home spoke not of victory, but of slow death in the snow. By midwinter, the once proud German army was a shadow of itself. Faces pale, eyes hollow, uniforms in tatters, men stumbled like ghosts, no longer soldiers but survivors. Songs and marching chants fell silent, replaced by coughs, groans, and cries of men losing fingers to frostbite. Letters home read like last confessions. "We are melting in the ice. We will not return." The Soviets exploited this collapse with psychological warfare, night raids, bugles, and war cries that shattered what morale remained. Many Germans surrendered without a fight, raising their hands not because they had lost their weapons, but because they had lost the will to live. The myth of the invincible Wehrmacht was broken, not by bullets alone, but by nature itself. As German armies crumbled, the Soviets prepared a decisive strike. Fresh divisions arrived from Siberia, hardened by years of fighting in icy conditions. Behind Moscow, new defensive lines had been built, and massive reserves were ready. In December, Soviet commanders gave the signal. Thousands of guns thundered, planes roared, and waves of soldiers stormed forward through the snow. Germans, frozen and starving, could not withstand the onslaught. Their lines collapsed, divisions scattered, and abandoned equipment became trophies for the Red Army. Moscow was saved, and the world saw that Hitler's army could bleed, retreat, and be broken. The German invasion of Russia, launched with absolute confidence, ended in disaster. The Russian winter, combined with Soviet resilience, turned Hitler's dream of conquest into a nightmare. What began as a march of triumph ended as a retreat of suffering, a broken army stumbling back through endless snow, defeated by cold, hunger, and despair. The Russian winter was not just a season. It was an army in itself, stronger than steel, harsher than bullets, and merciless to invaders. It did not merely delay Hitler's advance. It marked the beginning of the end for the Third Reich.